Hello, everyone. I'll just wait a second or two as everyone gets logged on. Welcome to the Central Wisconsin Book Festival today for this children's author panel. We will be discussing writing for children with 6 authors. Liesl Detlefsen is not able to attend today. My name is Elizabeth Lutz. I'm one of the festival organizers. Please say hi in the chat if you'd like. You can turn your cameras on, but please leave your microphones muted and ask any questions in the chat. I'd like to take a moment to thank our festival sponsors with a short video.
Hello, and welcome to the 2021 Central Wisconsin Book Festival. Before we begin, we would like to thank those organizations and businesses that help make this year's festival possible.
Our presenting sponsors and benefactors this year are
the Community Arts Grant Program and Community Foundation of North Central Wisconsin,
with funds provided by the Wisconsin Arts Board,
the Community Foundation,
the BA and Esther Greenheck Foundation,
the Marathon County Public Library Foundation,
Ware, and the Covantage Cares Foundation.
Our 2021 sustainers are Wisconsin Humanities,
with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities,
the Portage County Public Library Foundation.
Other supporters include the Marathon County Public Library,
the Portage County Public Library,
McMillan Memorial Library,
the Friends of the Marathon County Public Library,
the Marathon County Historical Society,
Whitewater Music Hall,
Wisconsin Public Radio,
and Janke Bookstore.
Thank you so much to all of our sponsors and supporters.
And thanks to you.
Thanks to you.
And thanks to you.
And thank you to you.
Thanks to you.
all of our authors, all of our readers.
And thanks to you for being part of the Central Wisconsin Book Festival.
Thank you, sponsors. I'm going to pass it on now to Sonia Ackerman. Just give me a moment, Sonia, to pull up our slides. She'll be introducing our panelists today.
Welcome all, and thanks for joining us. I'm happy to be here today to be in this group of people that love books. With us today as part of our panel, we have Anika Fajardo, an award-winning writer who was born in Columbia, raised in Minnesota, and she's the author of Magical Realism for Non-Believers, a memoir of finding family, and 2 middle-grade novels, What If a Fish and Meet Me Halfway. She lives with her family in Minneapolis.
Oops. Sorry, my arrows weren't working there.
Jillian Gertz is a Canadian cartoonist, writer, and illustrator. Her first graphic novel, Shirley and Jamila Save Their Summer, received star reviews from Purpose and Publishers Weekly, was included in the New York Times Public Library and the CBC Books Best Books of 2020, and was praised in the New York Times Review of Books. Her follow-up, Shirley and Jamila's Big Fall, comes out in fall 2021. Jillian loves drawing and talking about comics and creativity with kids and people of all ages. Alice Heinrich is a writer and artist residing in central Wisconsin. Her debut picture book, Eliot and the Moonship, published by Little Bit Lit, was released in November of 2019. She is currently overseeing her late father, Jerry Ruff's creative legacy. His debut picture book, My Room is a Zoo, published by Amicus Inc., was released on August 10th, 2020. Stepheni Curran grew up in Anika, Wisconsin. She aspired to be a dentist until a day spent job shadowing a speech language pathologist rerouted her career path. A passion for helping others and promoting acts of kindness led to Stepheni joining the Fox Valley Hidden Rocks Facebook group in June of 2017. The group inspired Stepheni to write her first children's book focused on the themes of rock painting, kindness, compassion, diversity, inclusion, and friendship. Rock on Kindness, Pass It On. Stepheni has since published a second book, Rock on Kindness, Even When Your Heart Hurts, also through Orange Hat Publishing. She is determined to share her book's messages as she believes acts of kindness can positively impact communities and foster unity. When Stepheni is not working as a speech language pathologist, she enjoys spending time with her husband and 2 children. Tracy Felix is a wife and mother of 3 children. When her oldest child was born, he was diagnosed with L1-CAM syndrome. This included a multitude of other complex medical issues, as well as a world of change in their lives. Tracy and her husband had to completely reevaluate life and to determine what was truly important. Tracy decided it was best to quit her job and care for her son full time. Through all of the ups and downs, she feels she has found her true calling through writing. Through her writing, she wants to bring awareness to the challenges that her son faced throughout his short life. She also wants to bring to light the great and wonderful love that her son gave to many people, and to let others know that regardless of disability, we are not alone. Cheryl Walken is the author of The ABCs of Wausau, a children's book about Wausau, Wisconsin. In 2014, Cheryl moved to Wausau with her family. 4 years later, after learning the ins and outs of our area, Cheryl started the website wausawmama.com, which provides information about events and activities for families in the Wausau area. Cheryl lives with her husband and 2 kids in western Wisconsin. As a family, they love to camp, travel, and read books. The ABCs of Wausau will be available this winter and is Cheryl's first book. So after 43 years of being a librarian, mostly a children's librarian in public and school libraries, I'm happily retired. I'm an active member of the library community in the central Wisconsin area and happy to join you today for this discussion. I currently sit on the board of trustees for the Wisconsin Valley Library Service, which is a 7 county library system that operates through this building in Wausau, Wisconsin to central Wisconsin. So welcome authors and welcome participants. And I would like to start out the questions by just reflecting a little bit on your influence and your inspiration. And because I can, I'm going alphabetically as any librarian would. So Anika, would you start us off with reflections about your inspiration or your reflecting on your influences?
Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for having me. My book is What If a Fish? It came out from Simon & Schuster in 2020. And it is a reflection of my experience as a half Colombian, half Minnesotan kid growing up. The story is about an 11-year-old boy who wants to be connected to his father who died when he was young. And his dad was from Colombia, and he has a much older half brother who he's also trying to connect to. And so I really wanted to find a way to explore kind of that experience of being different, of feeling not like you don't quite fit in either in your Minnesota experience, your Midwestern experience, or this other place that you've never been to before. And so I also wrote a memoir, and the memoir is like the adult true version of What If a Fish? What If a Fish is a story about kind of belonging and identity and figuring out where you belong, and figuring out what family means.
Awesome, thank you. Jillian, I see parallels in a little bit of Anika and your stories. Oh, you're muted, Jillian.
I see that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, my book, Shirley and Jamila Save Their Summer, is set in Toronto, where I live. And it's about Jamila Waheed, who's the daughter of Pakistani immigrants. And Toronto, if people don't know, is actually the most diverse city in the world because there's a massive immigrant population here that just makes it it's a really amazing place to live for that reason. But as a result, that immigrant stories are a big part of the Toronto landscape. And so Jamila is the daughter of parents who came from Pakistan, and it was born and raised in Toronto, but has a bit of that like 1 foot in and 1 foot out experience that in some ways comes down from the parents. And she makes an unlikely friendship with Shirley Bones, whose name sound alike, isn't a coincidence. It turns out she's like a 10-year-old child detective. And the two of them kind of figure out how to become friends together while they figure out how to solve various kind of child-sized crimes in their Toronto neighborhood. So yeah, the sequel, Shirley and Jamila's Big Fall, is out in November, provided that the various supply chain issues don't impact me directly, because it's a bit of a wild time to have a book out. It also, my first book also came out in 2020, and we're all experiencing this exciting pandemic world, and this is my first full-length graphic novel too. So I'm very excited to eventually be able to see people and meet readers and meet kids in person. That seems so foreign, but I'm delighted to find out how that will work.
Awesome. I look forward to the next book as well. Alice, what were your inspirations or your influences for your story?
My debut picture book was Eliot and the Moonship. It was published in 2019 by Little Bit Lit, which unfortunately did not survive the pandemic. They were a startup publisher, but it was a great experience nonetheless, and I have a physical copy of the book. So it was inspired by my childhood growing up in the Midwest, and also my relationship with my family. So, but those were the biggest influences. And then my dad's book, My Room is a Zoo, who my father passed away in March before he was able to see this completely to fruition, because it was released in August. This was, I believe, greatly inspired by raising 4 children. So yeah.
Awesome that you're able to carry on that legacy for him.
Yeah. Thank you.
Stephanie, we heard in your introduction about your joining a Facebook group. Was that a primary inspiration for you?
Yes, my children and I, when I took a year off as a speech language pathologist when I had my son, he's my second child. And during that time, I was taking my kids to a lot of different parks in the Neenah, Wisconsin area, which is just outside of Appleton, Wisconsin. And every time we would go to the park, we kept finding these painted rocks, and they were actually kindness rocks. So behind the backside of the kindness rocks, there was a Facebook group. So I had gone on to the Fox Valley Hidden Rocks group, and lo and behold, it had a large following. Now, these days, there's almost 15,000 people involved in the Kindness Rocks group. I know Wassa Rocks has their own group. There's over 2,000 Kindness Rocks in the United States alone. And so that was kind of one of my inspirations. Also, as a speech language pathologist, I have the opportunity to work with a lot of different families with different backgrounds. And so the point of my stories, so I have Pass It On, and then Rock on Kindness, Even When Your Heart Hurts. Both stories incorporate children that I've had the opportunity to work with. And also some of the characters are based off of my own children and their tendencies. But to just promote kindness, friendship, awareness of differences, and inclusion. So that's kind of the point of my stories.
Great, thanks. Up next, Tracy.
Hi. I love, Stephanie, that you have a kindness even when your heart hurts. Yeah, because my book is Jacob's Journey, and it is based on my son, my oldest son that is in a wheelchair. And he just put a smile on everyone's face. And shortly after he was born, I just felt like I needed to tell our story. And I thought I was going to start it off as an adult version. And then as the years progressed and life happened and we had more kids, I thought, maybe I need to change this into a children's book. And so we started the illustration process in October, and it was almost ready to be published. And then he actually passed away. And he was 8 And a month later, we decided that even through our stuff that we were dealing with, that we needed to push through, because this is why he was put here. So this is the first of probably 100 more that I have in my head. So yeah, that's my inspiration.
He sounds like he was an inspiring young man.
Yeah, he changed our world. So.
Yeah. And Cheryl, you got inspired by moving to a new home.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having us. I definitely was inspired by moving here, and I didn't know anyone. I didn't know what to do with my daughter at the time, and then now I have 2 kids. So I felt like I was kind of figuring everything out on my own. And then I realized, hey, like, why not put all this information on a website so I can help other parents? So I had that website, wasamama.com, for many years. And just this past year, I thought, wow, there are so many great things to do in the Wausau area. Other cities have their own ABC books, like why not Wausau? So that was an idea I had, and the book is basically finished, and I'll be sending it to the printer soon. And having children and reading to them has definitely been an inspiration for me too. We love ABC books and books about different places. So that was something that was an inspiration for me.
Great, thanks. So I'm sure you all have different processes, but I wonder if you have in common something that a writer would dread is writer's block. Does anyone want to address the question about what happens if you're kind of just stuck and motivation is not coming easily?
I guess I can speak to that. So when I have writer's block, what I like to do is read other authors' work. And I do a lot of reading as a speech language pathologist. I work with children that are in early childhood through 12th grade. So I read a lot of books. And so I like to do a lot of reading of authors, other authors' work. And also just, I also keep a journal and take notes every day and try to help myself collect my thoughts. And so journaling has helped me as well. So those are 2 of the ways that I help myself when I'm having issues progressing my story and I'm stuck in a writer's block. So
great. Anyone else?
I'll say also, I mean, I'm similar in this way that, oh, I'm not muted. Okay, I thought I was.
Good.
Reading other authors is a big piece of it, just to get your brain going, and making sure that I read more than one and don't focus on anybody, so I don't absorb anybody's style too much by accident. You don't want to sponge up somebody else and then just spit them out. But doing tasks, being physical and like going for walks, but also doing other tasks that I hate, like it's like procrastivity. It's like, I'm going to be productive by doing things that I put off in other life. So then my house and studio will suddenly be very clean, but often while I'm actually, scrubbing, it gets your brain off of the pressure to try and produce something in this one particular area. I think that's actually really useful. And you get the benefit of having checked, your taxes or whatever else, other looming things were on your list, off of that list. And then in the meantime, you kind of come out ahead. Bringing life sanity into the picture is helpful for me, because then there's not a to-do list that's pulling my attention away.
That sounds very familiar. I work in the same sort of fashion, cleaning my oven instead of writing term papers and things like that from my past. I'm remembering. Anyone else have a specific way that they work their way through?
Well, I totally agree with Jillian in that I think writer's block often is not about not being able to figure out what happens next, but it's more about like a fear of success. Maybe this book seems really scarily great, or maybe it's a fear of failure. Maybe you're realizing or feeling a lot of self-doubt. And so I think just like being really, really kind to yourself as a human and as a writer is super important to kind of get over that, so that, like Jillian said, kind of taking that pressure off. So it might be also definitely walks, but also kind of engaging in other arts. So maybe go to an art museum, or maybe listen to some music or something else that kind of fills that well, so that you're taking the pressure off of yourself. And procrastinating, for sure, definitely very important.
Yeah, I find, to go off of what you just said, I'm interested in writing and art. So when I'm in one area blocked, I go to a different one. Like you said, just to kind of step away from it, step back, to kind of refocus. I also do like mindless but satisfying tasks around the house. But yeah, definitely to step away. Because sometimes I feel like the harder I try to like finish something, the more I just get like, you just get laser focused on one thing, and you just have to step back to get a better idea of what direction you want to go and just clear your head. But yeah, having art on the side or writing, just going back and forth really helps me. And then also going to the library and seeing what my kids are drawn to. I like to see what they gravitate towards, because it gives me an idea, writing for children, what, jumps out at them. So definitely watching them and watching their friends helps too. So.
Anybody else? We can move on to another question. We're getting some from the participants, so thanks for putting those in the chat. Someone wants to know what your favorite who some of your favorite children's authors are. And someone mentioned that they try not to read just one author. I think that was Jillian, but do you have a top one or two favorite authors?
I think for me,
go ahead, please.
I think for me, one of my favorite authors is Dr. Seuss. Like, he just had so many books, and the kids are just drawn to him. And one of my other favorite ones is the author of the Berenstain Bears. I just like how detailed they were and how the characters grew throughout the series and through time. So.
Anyone else?
One of my favorite authors of all time is Beverly Cleary, who recently passed away. And just like the Ramona series for me is kind of, one of many top tier authors in terms of really honing in on children's world and the way that like a child's experience emotionally is as real to them as our adult experience is to us. And, problems that might seem small to an adult, that's all these kids have in their world. So the stakes are just as high. And that was really important for me as a kid reading books, to feel that I feel like it really acknowledges child personhood in a way that's really important. Books like that, Judy Blume is forever amazing. Louise Fitzhugh, who wrote Harriet the Spy, that was a really important book for me. With the great Gilly Hopkins, whose author I can't remember, embarrassingly, but that's
Catherine Patterson.
Catherine Patterson. I'm like Kit Peterson, but I knew that wasn't right. Yes. These some of these heartbreaking books for kids, like Bridge to Terabithia, Great Gilly Hopkins, are really, a nice place for kids to read about life at their level in a way that isn't condescending. So that's kind of what I look for in kids authorship. And those authors really hit it for me.
I saw Anika added a couple in the chat too. One of my favorites, Kate Dicamillo, probably currently writing for people. She's amazing. Anybody else have an addition?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm really drawn to illustrators and authors. So kind of mastering both of their crafts. So Marie Sundak, Julie Flett, Eric Carle, and Ezra Jack Keats, like they're always who I look towards because of the illustration, their quality, and their writing. And the thing I love about children's books is it's really hard to write things simply, and it's simplicity at its best for the writing, and then to build off of that with artwork. So just to see those two together, just the art and the writing, just those are the authors I look towards and illustrators. So.
And the borrowers, huh, Cheryl?
Yeah, an author I really like for picture books is Jackie Davis. She wrote the Ladybug Girls series, and I like how that they're very they're books where kids can really identify with what Ladybug Girl is going through. They're kind of simple, like, oh, just going to the beach for the first time, or having a play date with a friend, or like what you do when your brother doesn't want to play with you. Like these are very simple things, but every kid has experienced them, or most kids have experienced a lot of the things that she writes about. So I like how she really dissects one small thing that a kid is going through and fills it with beautiful pictures and has like a really touching story that kids can identify with. And I can't remember the author's name, but the author of Charlotte's Web.
E.B. White.
E.B. White, yes. I just recently read that book to my daughter, and I like had forgotten what a beautiful writer E.B. White is, the way that there's such beautiful descriptions in the book.
Yeah, all good suggestions here. Throughout the years, I had many people come into the library and ask me for advice about writing, and I always said, read, and then start to write, but read a ton first. Yeah. So
and I'll just add on to that.
I wanted to add something too. Go ahead, Annika.
Reading is so important as a writer. One thing that I have heard a lot, and I think is really true, is that to make sure that if you are interested in writing for children, that you're reading contemporary writers. So E.B. White and The Borrowers and all the classics are really great, but in order to break into publishing, you have to know what's going on in the current market and what people are publishing now, what kids are reading now. So that kind of that like getting your whole canon of reading so that you know what the what children's writing can be, but also knowing like what is the modern way and what is the stories that are being told now, what is the tone of stories now. So it's really, of course, it's exciting and also very challenging to keep up on all the things, all the new books coming out and all the new authors.
That kind of leads right into one of the questions that someone submitted about, what advice for, getting that book out the door. So Stepheni, continue with what you were going to say.
I was just going to say, no one had mentioned R.L. Stine, but he was my absolute favorite as a kid growing up. I actually wrote to him as a child, and he wrote back to me, and I was so ecstatic because I read pretty much every single book he published at the children's level, and the Goosebumps series was my favorite. I was a kid that grew up in the 90s. I loved the Boxcar Children's series, the Babysitter's Club. Those were all my favorites. But R.L. Stine, his books captivated me, and that's what. Also, Number the Stars by Lois Lowry was one of my favorites. And I read that book in 4th grade, and I think. I don't know, but I when R.L. Stine wrote back to me, I think that's what really just drove me and inspired me to try writing on my own. And so I started participating more in writing contests. So I think that was my inspiration just as a kid. So.
Awesome. So anybody have any advice for aspiring authors to try to get things going? I know the process of writing is one thing, but then the process of publishing is maybe almost too big for the time that we have today, but maybe a hint or two.
I guess I can start with that. So when I first wrote my first book, I honestly had just participated in writing contests. I really didn't have any professional experience. I'm a speech language pathologist, but never really trained to become an author per se. So I had only had written a lot of IEPs. I've written a lot of professional documents, but nothing for a children's book. So I did a lot of research and looked at a lot of examples online. Spoke with our local librarians, and that was in Neenah, Wisconsin, the Neenah Public Library, and just began creating a rough draft, and that's kind of how I began the process. I had ideas in mind, and I put it onto paper, and then I began adding that to a Google Doc and just made changes as I went. But that's how I began my process with my first children's book, getting insight from others and just adding my ideas and creating. I created page by page. So I had page 1, page 2 to create ideas and add to it. But I'm sure the other panelists have suggestions too for how they wrote their first books.
Well, for me, I actually never wanted to be an author growing up. Like I was going to be a teacher, right? But after we had our son, I had this idea for the children's book. I knew I wanted to keep it really super simple. So I just got one of those little like notebooks that I would carry around with me, and not even a full size one. And I would just write down like, okay, this is the journey that I want him to go on this time, or this is the adventure I want him to go on this time. And so I just have little slips of paper all over the place for my rough draft. And then my biggest challenge was to find an illustrator and someone that I really loved their pictures for, because that is such an essential part of a children's book and what's going to keep them captivated. Well, for my level of writing, I'm geared more toward like preschool and kindergarten age right now. So pictures were really important, and it took me a long time to find someone. But I went to a writer and speaker conference where there was other people kind of like here, where it was other authors and other illustrators and people that have gone before me and telling about their experiences. And so I got connected with my illustrator through that and went from there. So
would to add on to that, when I finished the manuscript for Eliot and the Moonship, I totally underestimated how daunting it is to find a publisher and writing query letters and looking at publishing houses. I think the biggest thing was looking for publishing houses that have similar titles to yours, but then also is different than their titles. So it'd be a complement to what they have. And I looked through a lot of publishing houses, a lot of publishers, and I got a lot of rejections. So but just keep trying, and eventually, it was really magical when someone says yes. I mean, I just can't even put it into words, but I definitely underestimated, the importance of a good query letter, and then really doing research on different publishing houses that would be a good match for your manuscript. So.
Yeah, I think it's important for people who want to become authors to remember that there are so many ways nowadays to publish and print a book. Or if you just do an ebook, you're not even having to print it. So yeah, like there's the traditional route, there's indie publishing, and there's, doing a Kickstarter to raise the funds first. So I think that's really cool that nowadays there are so many routes you can go, but then that's also a lot more decisions that you have to make. So I'm doing indie publishing myself. So that was what I thought would be best for my book. But yeah, there's definitely so many options out there.
I think we have half and half traditional publishing and indie publishing books on our panel. One of the more traditional route authors, do you want to talk? Well, I guess Alice did a little bit of that, but
yeah. I just saw Anika put up the Loft and out of Minneapolis, and my husband for my birthday got me a manuscript critique through there, and it was so beneficial. I highly recommend. That's a great resource for aspiring authors and writers.
I'm so glad you said that, Alice, because I actually serve on the board and I do manuscript critiques at the Loft.
Oh, you do? Yeah.
So yay.
Yeah.
So at the Loft right now is, because of COVID, is all services and all classes are online through January, at least for sure. And so that's available everywhere. The SCBWI is the organization for authors of children's book. And so that's a really great resource to connect you with publishers, to learn more about agents, to enter contests. I personally got my agent through being part of Pitch Wars, which is a contest where writers are connected with traditionally with either agented or published authors, and then you work with that person for a while to get your book ready, your pitch ready. And so that's how I found my agent, and that went pretty fast, except that I'd been searching for an agent and publisher for both my memoir and my book for probably 5 years. And Alice mentioned rejections, and so that's a humongous part of the traditional publishing journey. But it's also, like you said, Alice, like it's so amazing once you finally get a yes, and in both of those, in finding an agent and finding when you finally get a publisher too. And then all of publishing is all about waiting and being patient. Every single step of it involves an enormous amount of waiting and doing nothing while you wait. So it's always like working on the next project, always.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. Thank you. So what are those next projects? Is everybody working on something right now, taking a break? What's up?
I'm working on the next book is actually already illustrated. I'm in the process of formatting and all of that right now, but it's just a continuation of Jacob's journey. And then the second book is going to be called Let's Go, instead of introducing Jacob. So this will talk more about our home life and our family and what it takes to get him ready for the day, because he is in a wheelchair and he's got all these other things that typical kids don't have. So it kind of goes into more of that process. So
great.
I'll go. I'm working on proposals for the next book. It's the graphic novel writing process is extremely grueling, I found. And so my second book comes out in November. And so I'm just working on proposals for book 3. I'm also looking at, I used to have a webcomic that was more like a teen diary. And while I was working on my first book, I let the website lapse because I was so enmeshed in getting the book done. So now I'm looking at potentially publishing that, as well as maybe looking at a picture book. And a quick side note, as a Canadian, in terms of getting into publishing, I don't know if anyone in the audience is this, Canada has a bunch of granting programs. So if you're able to access grants, that can be a huge boost to any writing project. And another huge thing about getting like an agent getting published is being a part of a community. I'm a part of an online Facebook group that guided me to a writing conference where I was able to speed pitch agents. And once that happened, everything started to move. So it was, and I came in very much from the illustration world. I was a freelance illustrator for 10 years. And the idea of the graphic novel was kind of born out of making artwork. So having the writing stuff kind of be secondary, just don't be shy if you're outside of that writing community to dive into it. Once I dove in, everyone was so welcoming and really ready to share a lot of information. So anyway, that's what's up with me.
Anybody else have a project in the works?
Go ahead.
Oh, as I mentioned, my father, Jerry Ruff, passed away in March of this year unexpectedly, and his debut book came out in August. So fortunately, he was able to see the PDF version of the book, but he has 3 other titles coming out in 2022 to 2023. So seeing those to fruition, finalizing them. And then additionally, he left behind a lot of writing. So I'm doing like looking through his writing and just taking my time and enjoying seeing these books become published and promoting them. And he was 66 when he passed away, and his lifelong dream was, he was always an editor throughout his whole career, and he always would write on the side. But with 4 kids, you know, that's kind of, he waited till his retirement to really pursue it fully. And it was during his retirement of 1 year that he got these books slated for publication. So it's been really bittersweet working on them. And so that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I have my second middle grade novel is coming out in the spring. I don't know when exactly. I'm in the middle, waiting for edits from my editor. right now. So I'm very excited about it because it's a book about girls instead of a boy this time, which is nice because I have a little more experience with that. And I've been saying it's sort of like a Parent Trap meets the mixed up files of Mrs. Basil Frankweiler. So it's sort of an adventure story, and it's about half siblings. And so it's been really fun to get that ready. And I'm kind of working on some picture books on the side, but picture books are really hard. I'm impressed with everyone who writes picture books. So I'm excited about that.
I agree. We had a question specifically come in for Cheryl for an ABC book. How did you make your book stand out from other ABC books?
Great question. Mine has photographs, so that's, I think, a little unusual for ABC books. But I wanted to really showcase the exact things that we have in our community. And I have already had some kids see the pictures and be like, oh, I've been there, or, oh, I recognize that. And I think it's, you know, when it's really clear to them what the things are, they can get really excited about the book and maybe going through and seeing like which things they've done, which things they haven't done yet. And almost making like a little bucket list out of the book too, I think would be fun for kids to see which things they still want to do in the area.
Great. Anika mentioned getting edits from an editor, and if you've worked with an editor, how can an editor really help your process along, or sometimes maybe send you back to square one?
I like the editor's insight on technical writing and especially word usage, because at times I think I also like to incorporate a peer review before I even move to the professional editor. I like to do my own peer review, typically with 7 to 10 adults or children. It kind of depends on what perspective I'm looking for. But for a professional editor, I do like the insight that the editor brings to the table in terms of looking at word usage, punctuation. Punctuation is changing. I learned that hyphens have changed at times. So hyphen usage. So I think an editor can give you insight that maybe just having, say, a friend look at your writing cannot necessarily provide. So I think a professional editor is very insightful, and that editor has also read many works of other authors and can give insight of the pros and cons to maybe how a story is going along. And so I've always received constructive feedback from my editor, and I think that has really helped. Orange Hat Publishing is the publisher I work with in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and Lauren Blue was my editor for my last book, and I'm very grateful for the insight that she gave me, because she made me think outside of the box and make improvements. And so I'm very grateful for the work that she added to my second book.
For me, it was just really punctuation and a little bit of sentence structure, but my books are pretty easy and pretty simple to read. So I think they're still important, and I have a couple people that are just really gifted in catching, like, oh, there should be a comma right there, or whatever, and they have helped a lot in the process.
Yeah, with my book, it was, because this was my first full-length graphic novel, it's like the script is more like a play or a movie script that has a lot of description. And I mean, I am a terrible speller, so that much was involved, but the story structure of it, I really am grateful for the editing that I received from that. There was a lot of, we cut huge chunks out because it was just like, and a lot of stuff around focus on whose perspective we were looking at it. The earlier draft of Shirley and Jamila Save Their Summer focused a lot more on sort of the mother's perspective. And my editor was really great to be like, hey, this needs to be a kid's story. Let's keep it in the kid world. And I cut big chunks of it. And it's heartbreaking to cut those things, but the story was instantly better for it. So, I mean, for anybody who's working on a manuscript, don't be afraid to cut stuff out and like be a bit aggressive with your cuts. You can always pull it back in if you found that it was a mistake, but by and large, being a little bit more ruthless and really always going, the editor really taught me that if it doesn't serve story, it doesn't need to be there. So you might have a pet chapter or a pet moment that's in your book. It's got to go if it's not helping tell the overall story. At the end of the day, it's a distraction, especially with kids, I think, because kids don't, beautiful descriptions. Like, I mean, like E.B. White is a master, but it generally, like, the idea of authors who want to really spin a yarn or like do some sort of experimental, that's kind of like a personal pet project. If it doesn't further plot, kids aren't going to care about it, I think. So I think kids' books really need to serve plot on the daily, and the beautiful moments can be baked into that. But an editor really, really helped me cut that stuff back and maintain the focus of the story and kind of like hinge it around. I had the bones, but definitely stuff got moved around, and I'm very grateful for it.
To go off of that, my dad was an editor, so obviously I think it's very important, and I can't, he taught me so much, but one of the most important things, and I think this really pertains to children's writing, is I tend as an adult to over-explain things, and you need to let your reader, you don't have to like give them everything. They can come up with it too, if that makes sense. And that helps as far as like keeping down the word count for children's writing and fitting in, like, usually it's within 32 pages is like how the book is printed, and you have to fit your words into there. And it's kind of a puzzle, and taking things out. And like you said, not being too, it's hard to get rid of something that you think is beautifully written and you spend all this time on it. It's like, no, it doesn't need to be there. So yeah.
I also think the editor, just going off of what Alice was saying too, just conciseness. I tend to be wordy at times, so it's helpful to bring it down a notch and try to making sure that my storyline is readable to a child, and you want to really engage that child. And if you have too many words on each page, the child loses interest oftentimes. So it's very important to know your audience when you're writing. And I really have benefited from having an editor. I've really appreciated the insight that I've received. And but yeah, working on conciseness has always been what I always strive to do. So
one other thing I'd love to mention too is that particularly with kids' books, picture book and graphic novel, where there's illustrations, those are doing a lot of storytelling work. So if you're writing like a kid's picture book, having a relationship with that illustrator and letting them, if it's not you, use the pictures to tell a story. Like my sort of default because I drew and wrote, was if I can show, don't tell. So if I can tell it through the pictures, I can cut those words. And especially because, reading level's not always there, or this is a tool for kids to learn to read, the less I can do with the words, the better a story I can tell visually. And I mean, some of my favorite kids' books illustrators are also telling a simultaneous story, especially in picture book form, that's like secondary or an extra subtext or an extra something to the written words. So, that's a piece of the puzzle as well.
Anika added a note too about different kinds of editors. Thank you for that, Anika. We just have about 5 minutes left. I could throw it out there to a random question, but here's just an idea. What's the best part about what you do, and what's the hardest part about what you do?
I think the best part for me is just continuing my son's legacy. And it's really given our other two kids something that they can physically hold on to remember their brother. And There's been a few times where they have helped me either read the book or help explain like life with him. And but that is also the most difficult part because he just passed away in April. So it's still pretty fresh in all of our heads and our hearts. And it can be tough to talk about that. And I recently did a book reading in my son's class. He's in second grade right now. And his classmates all remember seeing brother in the hallway. And so they inevitably asked, where is he? And where's he now? And that's tough to do and not just completely fall apart. So it's the best thing. It's healing for us, but it's also very hard to do.
Yes, I can feel that from your experiences. Thank you. And I should just add, if anyone else wants to chime in, you also could add your contact information into the chat in case someone wants to be in touch with you specifically about your book or your work. Anyone else want to do the good and the bad and the fun?
Well, I think that, the best part is when you think you've written a story that's for yourself, that is very personal, and you meet readers who have had really different experiences, and yet they are identifying with your story. There's something really magical about that connection between your personal experience and the personal experience of somebody that you've never met. It's an amazing experience. And the most difficult part is definitely all the waiting and the rejection. The waiting and the rejection, not very fun. But in the end, it's worth it because you get to sit and write for other people.
Great. Anyone else?
I think one of my favorite parts was actually getting a physical copy of the book. This book took me all told probably 5 years to make, but 2 intense years of actually making it, and being able to hold the physical result of all of this waiting and all of this time was a super thrill. Maybe the worst part is looking through the book and finding mistakes that you wish you'd caught, and things that it was like, oh, if I could have, I would have done that differently, or like, oh, I thought this would come out this way and it didn't. So there is a piece there of having to just it's in the world, you got to release it, you got to let go of the things that you wish you could fix.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably the hardest part for me right now is my book's not out yet. So I think once it's out, that'll be the best part. But yeah, I think the hardest part is just realizing that eventually you're going to have to stop. You're going to have to stop fixing things, stop editing, stop asking for people's opinions. It just has to eventually be good enough and be done, and then just appreciate it for what it is.
I guess my best part was I love doing school, going to different schools and presenting, and more recently it's been more Zoom meeting presentations, but the one presentation that stands in my mind was a presentation I did was before the pandemic began. And I was reading my first story, Rock and Kindness, Pass It On. And one of the characters in the story is Noah, and he's deaf. And so there's a component where he's signing and teaching the lead character, Allie, how to sign. And 2 girls in the audience were also hard of hearing, and they primarily communicated using sign language. So they were signing along with me, and it was awesome to see. And they were so engaged and just so excited to see a character in a story that communicated the way they did. So that was probably my best moment. Also just sharing my stories with my own children too. I love my kids are the first kids to hear my stories when I write them in manuscript and when they're finally published. So sharing it with my children, and they've come with me to a lot of book events. They've been troopers. My daughter's getting really interested in writing herself. So I think it's been a family journey, and my husband has been so supportive of me with this. This is kind of a side hobby for me because my main job is pretty demanding. But I guess the most challenging component I would say is marketing. Marketing is very challenging. Once you've published the book, everyone thinks, oh, publishing is hard. Marketing is challenging that's a completely different beast, I would say. And just learning and educating myself on different ways to market, because now you have so many different social media platforms, and trying just to become more savvy with social media, with book marketing, and trying to stay current and modern in how I present myself as an author. So I would say that's probably the most challenging piece.
Let's see, did we hear from everybody on that question?
I guess I didn't respond. My favorite part is the creating Ellie and the Moon Ship. I have a BFA in drawing, so when I started it, I was thinking of illustrations. Even I did not illustrate it, but when I wrote it, I was thinking of, I want to illustrate a book. So just writing, creating art, that's my favorite part. What is hard for me is like the business side of it. But query letters, social media, just all the things that go into making a book successful. So.
Some common themes running through all your responses. Thank you very much. We are really out of time. This event was recorded and will be posted at some point in the near future on the Central Wisconsin Book Festival website. And so you can go back and take notes if you didn't have time or catch something that you didn't. I'd like to thank everyone participating and everyone listening, and to Elizabeth for doing the tech end of things. And any other parting comments before we sign off, Elizabeth?
Thank you everyone for coming. I put in the chat a link to our survey if you wouldn't mind filling that out. It'll help us plan our events for next year. And I also want to make sure everybody knows that tomorrow at Whitewater Music Hall, some of these authors will be at the Wisconsin Book Fair. If you use the reactions, you can raise your hand if you're going to be at the Wisconsin Book Fair. Anika Fajardo already spoke at an event for us for the Central Wisconsin Book Festival. That will be posted soon on our festival YouTube channel. And Jillian Gertz has an event tomorrow at 4 o'clock. That's virtual, that you can join us for. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.